Well, welcome to the PDP Dairy Signal on behalf of the professional dairy producers and the fellow board members and leaders that I work for in the dairy industry. Welcome to today's Dairy Signal. We're at a really exciting time in our winter venture here at Professional Dairy Producers. We're getting ready for the upcoming business conference that will be held in Madison, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people that are registered for that conference, and we're excited for it. If you've not registered yet, please get your name on the list. We've got about 50 sessions, 50 speakers, and we're bringing them all to you in a 2-day forum. Not only is it a good investment of your dollar to be at the PDP conference, but this time and age in the dairy sector is a great way to put a little spring in your step before spring steps on you and you get into high speed. It gives you the opportunity to fill up your cup on knowledge as well as some great energy and inspiration. So I hope to see you all next week at the PDP Business Conference in Madison at the Alliant Energy Center. Today, we've got some real good stuff for you. Anybody who's working with people, the cows seem to be sometimes the easy ones to manage and lead on our dairies. As you feed them, you get predictable results, and you pretty much can work and experience and know what you're going to get out of those cows. It's sometimes people. We're a little bit more complicated. And today, we're going to dive into those discussions that help you tune in and help you maybe fine tune some of your leadership and management with some real candid conversations about handling the ethical dilemmas that happen in the workplace. And for that discussion, we're bringing you Don Tyler, and Don is the founder of Tyler and Associates, which is an executive and a management coach. So, Don, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brings you here with expertise and excitement to professional dairy producers.
Well, sure, Shelley. It's great to be on with you and with everyone again. My background is I grew up on a farm, managed farms for 16 years, was a partner in one for about half of that time. And for the last 30 years now, I've been a management coach. I just chose to go into that because I worked with so many other family farms that were friends of mine, neighbors, people that I ran into professionally that just struggled a lot with well, whether it was family issues and communication or decision making or structure, or even with larger businesses that struggle with those same things, and just, how do we help people get from where they are to where we want them to be and help everybody to get to their potential and just minimize the number of challenges and frustrations and conflict and so on that we have in the workplace.
Well, give me a snapshot of what I'm going to learn today and how we're going to walk through these next few minutes so that I maximize what I can take back to my home, my family, and my dairy.
Sure. So we're going to talk about ethical dilemmas.
Mhm.
And we're going to start with that definition. I'm going to give you some examples of that. And then I'm going to walk you through a very methodical process to make the best decision when you have an ethical dilemma. And as you hear the definition, you'll see how ethical dilemmas are different from our normal people management challenges that we have. And then as we go through that a step-by-step process, I'm actually going to use an example. And Shelley, if you would just kind of interact with that and give me your questions and your thoughts, because this is what I want people as we go through this. I want people to kind of put themselves in a situation and be asking themselves, so what would I do if I had someone in that situation? And there's no one thing about ethical dilemmas is there's not really very many wrong answers. There's a challenge between what's best and worst, or what's just what's difficult. So a definition of an ethical dilemma is it's a challenge in the decision-making process between two or more possible options, none of which are clearly right or wrong from an ethical perspective. In other words, we've got a lot of options here that just simply aren't necessarily black and white. These are times where we need to make a tough call because of our established policies, our guidelines, maybe even laws and our precedents just don't clearly give us the direction that we need. Some examples of ethical dilemmas that I've run into as I work and coach my clients over the last many years. A new employee is instructed by an experienced employee to do something that's inconsistent with policies, such as maybe recording information a little bit inaccurately, kind of fudging the numbers just because it makes things look better. Another one is that your most reliable, long-term, highest producing manager who's never come in late in the 8 years that he's worked with you. He's come in late 3 times in the last month, and they've come in late, for an important shift. Another one is maybe you've got this up and coming employee that you're personally mentoring. You feel like she has lots and lots of potential, and you're just trying to, help her reach that potential. And some weekend, she goes out with friends and she makes some foolish decisions, and everybody in the business heard about it. And not only that, but she got picked up for disorderly conduct. So she spent a little time in jail over the weekend. All right. And then an additional one, you've got an equipment operator, somebody that's been with you for a long time, um, used to have a problem with alcohol. They've been sober for 5 years, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they get arrested for a DUI, and they call you on your cell phone at 5 o'clock in the morning, asking you to bail them out of jail. Well, tough situation, but you know what? They're your number one chopper operator, and it's the middle of silage season, and you really need them. You don't have somebody else. So how do you handle that? So, these are ethical dilemmas because for a variety of reasons. They're really good employees. These would be easier to decide if they were a brand new employee or they were, somebody who just really, they maybe been with you for a while, but they're just not a star employee by any means. Maybe there's somebody that you trusted, somebody that you really were pouring a lot of effort into because you saw the potential, and then they just made a foolish choice that revealed maybe their character is not quite what you thought it was. And maybe you just really admire somebody. You feel like they've had a difficult time and a difficult life, and they're doing well, and they have a relapse. And so, how do you handle that? And obviously, if you've dealt with people for several years, you've run into these tough kinds of situations, and obviously, there's a few situations where people misbehave, and automatically, we know that this is an immediate termination. It's something like animal abuse, sexual harassment, physical attack on someone, an illegal activity either at the business or that is very well known and is going to put the business in a bad light, hurt the reputation of the business. Those are pretty straightforward. We're not talking about those types of situations.
Those are all tough ones. And I have a feeling that some of those examples come from experiences that you've seen and dealt with. So it'll be interesting to hear you kind of go through how do we get our hands around it? How do we sort out the ethical from sometimes it's just straight black and white. Here's what the handbook says. It sounds like the ethical is that gray area of how do we sort it out to move forward in the what's best for the person, best for the business.
Well, that's exactly right. And as as we walk through these, it's important to have a step-by-step process so that you know that you're doing the best thing, not something, but the best thing. So maybe as we go through these, let's use that tardy manager who's been with us for several years and all of a sudden has been tardy 3 times in the last month. So we can use that so that we'll just reflect on that as we go through this. So the first step is to realize what you're dealing with, making sure that this is an ethical dilemma. Again, as you mentioned, Shelley, these are things that are just not quite straightforward. And so maybe our policy just is inadequate to deal with it. Maybe we've had a similar situation in the past, but this one is different because it's a different individual or a different situation. Um, Basically, something in our gut is telling us that something's off. This
Mhm.
this just isn't right. This is not what I expected from this person. And so really to a certain extent, our character is going to be tested. That's what our gut is telling us is that, this is kind of a character test on us as to how we handle this best. And, maybe our instincts are good, but we want to make sure that we go beyond that and make sure that we're making again the best decision. So we want to recognize, no, this is one of those ethical decisions. And then the next step is to gather all the facts in a very open-minded manner. So we don't want to make any snap judgments. We don't want to make any assumptions. We want to make sure that we have maybe some personal blind spots or personal biases, that we don't allow those to interfere with that. And we just want to make sure that we're getting all the possible information that we can. And so in this situation with our manager, just gathering the facts, probably the first person we want to talk to is that manager and just ask them. You know, so what's going on here? This is the first time you've been late like this, and what's going on? And you know, they say they are very apologetic. They're very sincere about their apology. They let you know that they've got some personal things going on, but it's a private matter. They don't want to talk about it, and they just really don't want it to be a potential point of gossip in the business or anything like that. Their families decided to keep it private. And so, they just are asking for that privacy. They're fine with whatever the consequences are. If I, am going to get docked on pay, or there's, some other kind of penalty, that manager says straight up, no problem, just do whatever you do. And they're also assuring us that, they're going to do all they can to correct the behavior, make sure it doesn't happen. So those are things that would happen. Of course, there's a bit of a red flag there that this is a personal situation. Yeah.
So
The
then what?
next, yeah, it is a dilemma. It is a
Yeah,
dilemma.
big
And
dilemma.
yeah, yeah. So now that we've talked to the manager, we're still at this questioning, data gathering part of the process. And so the next thing we're going to do is probably going to talk to their coworkers, because as the owner of the business, I I have a sense of obligation. I need to help this person. They have a personal issue. They've let me know that. I don't know what it is. They won't tell me what it is. But feel a sense of obligation, partly and mostly because it's disrupting their life, and it's just disrupting their performance at work, and it's having an effect on coworkers. So we're going to prepare ourselves then to ask some of their coworkers, not everybody in the business, but the ones that are directly affected by this and maybe know them the best. So we want to avoid any hearsay, any third-party information. We don't want to make any assumptions, or even have any personal biases about the people that are involved, the people we're going to ask questions of. We're not going to listen to gossip. We're not going to listen to, things that just the rumors that are going around. We just want to make sure that we're going directly to the source and getting accurate information. So, probably going to ask them all fairly much the same questions. We'll ask some follow-up questions based on what we hear. But we're mostly going to focus on the facts and the facts only. If we hear somebody starting to insert an opinion, or somebody who's maybe starts to sound like they're embellishing information a little bit, maybe exaggerating some, we're going to ask them to stay away from that. And also, if they're starting to quote people and maybe things that people said, we're going to ask them to repeat those to us exactly as the other person said them. The same tone, the same volume, the exact same words as much as possible. Because again, we want accurate information. We don't want people's opinions at this point. We have to make the decision. We'll handle that, but we want to make sure that we're getting accurate information. So some questions that we might ask that those coworkers, we might. It's always best to start fairly general, kind of like a funnel. At the top of the funnel, things are very general, and as we keep asking questions, we get more and more and more specific. So we'd ask them, so how's the manager been doing lately? We get some information from that. So have you noticed any changes in them, any changes in their behavior? Do they seem to be distracted in any way? Are they different than they've been in the past? Have they said anything that might be going on with them, or might explain this situation. So we're just going to ask these general questions. We'll let them, provide information. We'll ask some follow-up questions to make sure that we're getting good, again, accurate information. And then in this situation, we go back to our scenario. Here's what the employees told the owner. Well, the manager hasn't been himself lately. And this is pretty good consensus from the employees. That person has just not been themselves. They used to be really talkative and even funny and really engaged in their job. And now he seems to be just avoiding people, kind of keeps to himself. Um, they see that he's clearly distracted. A couple people said that he's just kind of lost in thought. It just seems like he's not, you kind of have to get his attention to talk to him, which is very, very odd for him. Also, he seems tired all the time. It just seems like he's really kind of wrung out and just been harried and just seems to not be getting, good sleep. And in the past, he really talked on his cell phone, except for business type things. And if he got a call, he would answer the call, in front of everybody and have that conversation. But now, a lot of times, if his phone rings, he makes sure he goes away from people and has that call by himself. So there's clearly some some significant changes in this person's life. And it's so be we want to be very thoughtful about that in that situation.
Okay, so how do you determine, so first of all, what I heard was you have an individual that's distracted at work, coming in late, acting very different, they're a manager. So first you approach that person. They shared with you that they do have something personally going on, but they decided they want to stay very private with it. They'll take in any consequence from a pay deduction and time that you suggest to them, but they just want to they want to deal with it on their own. Then you take it to the next step, though. You are going out to their team and seems like you're investigating amongst their team. How do you decide to walk that line of fueling gossip, fueling concern, even leaving the manager feeling like maybe you don't have their back by doing some investigation behind a tight team? Well, typically everybody will know very quickly.
Oh yeah.
How
Yeah,
do you,
everybody's yeah, yeah. As soon as you ask the first employee these questions, everybody else knows what the questions are before you even ask them. That's
well,
that's that's to be expected.
and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
manager might have more on their mind then too.
Sure, sure.
You'll
And
distrust.
and so some of this is this is where it pays great dividends to know our employees, to know which questions to ask of which individuals, maybe some individuals that you're just not going to include, simply
Mhm.
because you know that it's immediate gossip, they can't keep their mouths shut, and you just don't want to start that. And others that you definitely want to talk to, and maybe even some that aren't directly involved because they're the people who kind of like everybody confides in. They're just this really nice, sweet person in the business, and everybody confides in them, and everybody likes them, and everybody takes their problems to them. And so we want to think that through. So it's also important when we're asking these questions to let people know what our objective is. Our objective is to solve the problem. We do not want any gossip out of this. We don't want anybody, taking any of this information out. I, as the owner, I'm only going to share the information that I glean. I'm going to selectively share that information with others. And as I ask questions of people, I'm kind of building a base of information, and I'm going to continue to maybe probe a little deeper on that. Um, this is a situation that goes down to our core values about who we are as a company. And that, hey, are we a real family-based company that we take care of each other, we look out for each other. When we say we're a family-based company, it's a good thing. Okay. Some people, when you say, well, we try to treat each other like family, sometimes people see that as a bad thing. But we're going to work with our employees. We're going to do everything that we can to help them. And so those questions need to be asked with that tone, that kind of an inflection, that kind of a level of curiosity to make sure that we're getting accurate information. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So you've done those 2 steps. Then what?
So then we go back to the manager. And now we have some basic information that's consistent that we've gotten from enough people that we have 4 or 5 things that we know we can approach them with, and it's fairly consistent. So we're going to ask that manager. We can say, I'm really concerned about you. I appreciate this is a private family matter. But I wanted to tell you, I've talked to your coworkers, and they're very genuinely concerned about you, as am I. And I'm just curious, can you share anything else with me about what's going on? And I remind them that that their coworkers are concerned about them, but they see behavior that is just not like you, and people again generally concerned. So whatever's going on in your life is affecting your work, and as far as I'm concerned, I can't let that go. I have an obligation as an owner. If somebody has even a personal issue that is affecting their work and affecting their relationships at work and even their level of productivity, I'm obligated to do what I can to find out what that is. If I don't take this action, it's kind of like having somebody in the business who's got a medical problem and not asking them about it. I mean, they clearly have some kind of a medical issue and not offering them first aid. So I need to help that manager understand really my sense of obligation. And throughout this process, we have to be what we would refer to as an active listener. We have to be fully engaged. We have to be asking questions. We have to probably even be taking notes, making sure that we've got information right. And we find that if we're a really good active listener in these situations, we actually collect a lot more quality information. People are more willing to talk to us. And we actually see the common threads among those individuals and those responses. So then here's what the manager said. Okay, after all of this, and now I'm the owner and I've approached this manager, come back to him. And so here's what the manager said. He said he didn't want to tell anybody because it's personal, and he just didn't want to be a distraction to everybody else. Here's a person who's been here for 8 years. He's a very loyal person. He's a team player. He didn't want his personal issues to distract everybody else. I see that as a common thing, a common attitude that really loyal employees have, is they don't want to drag their personal things to work and be a distraction to everybody else. But the challenge is this has gotten beyond that. At first, again, a personal issue. At first, he and his wife were working through this situation, but then it became more difficult as the situation wore on. He shared then that he's got a son with cancer, and the only treatment center is 4 hours away. And so they did make sure that they could only do the treatments on the weekend, but it's a 4-hour drive one way. And so he and his wife they were at first trying to swap weekends. Okay, she would take him one weekend, he'd take him the next weekend. And I mean, these are long weekends. This has got to be there Friday night, about 8 or 9 o'clock, and have to stay until mid-late afternoon on the Sunday. So to get out of work on a Friday and get back on a Monday, obviously that would be pretty stressful with all of that driving. Well, they tried to switch back and forth, and it just didn't work. His wife just didn't feel like she was safe driving back that Sunday night. And so he said he'd do all the driving. She'll stay home with the kids. That was probably more consistent because I have 2 other kids, and probably more consistent for them to have mom home while their brother is going to these treatments. And so things are going well, but the treatments are going okay. But it's probably going to be another couple of months at least that they've got to be in this routine. So hearing that, and Shelley, I don't know, maybe people are chatting in with with their own thoughts on things, but what do you what do you think about hearing that information based off of what you knew before and what you know now?
Well, you certainly could share empathy with the person, let them know, acknowledge that you still care about them and that you you'll walk with them and their family. If you're truly committed to that employee, I think you would want to reinforce that so they don't feel like they have to be looking over their shoulder. Often people work better when they're trusted and when they have support versus when they're just um, kind of hanging out there on their own. The question that I would have is, as you set this precedence and working with this employee, and especially since you've went back to the coworkers, how does this ethical dilemma differ from maybe common workplace situations? How do you separate this personal dilemma from other situations that are just black and white work related?
Yeah.
This is kind of soft and gushy because it is very complicated with someone's home situation impacting
Yeah.
work. But there's plenty of behaviors that maybe generate from home that, that person that it's always, if you're supposed to be on task until 4:30, there's always a reason why they got to leave early. How do you deal with those issues?
Yeah. Yeah.
How's
So
it?
so yeah, it and this exactly, helps to define that difference between what's a normal kind of a workplace situation, what's an ethical dilemma. You mentioned a couple of this is an odd situation. And
Mhm.
that tends to be typical of ethical dilemmas. This is just an odd situation. This is very uncommon. Um, Another thing that we take into account is we can't help but notice or take into account the fact this is a long-term loyal employee. He didn't share this information out of his own loyalty, out of his desire to not disrupt anybody else. And so, so he's even operating and making choices in somewhat a unique way. I mean, there are other employees who, everything's going on in their life,
Mhm.
and that's a distraction. But, but they, in this situation, very loyal employees, somebody that you trust, and somebody that, they've been so loyal to you, you want to be loyal to them. This is almost an opportunity for me to help that person, to serve that person, to extend some grace in this situation and make us a better team, make us a better a more cohesive team.
And have
So
people pulling for one another and
right.
caring for one another. A very caring culture probably will continue to be supported through that
Yeah,
action.
yeah, yeah.
So what are some
And
of the mistakes people commonly that you see commonly make when they're put in this situation?
well, there's and we can come back to that or we it's a good time to talk about that. I think some of the more common mistakes are they get into a situation even before they know this information and they just don't take any action. It's like, well, they're a good employee. They'll probably work through it, just not taking it, not going the next step to find out what's going on. Um, Hearing, the stage that we're at in this, we've got a couple of more steps to go to resolve this and come up with a solution. Sometimes people don't think of all the potential options. Sometimes they're kind of narrow in their thinking. Sometimes they have their own personal biases. Maybe they don't even think that there's time available to help, and so they just don't really think it through well. Um, Sometimes people come up with a solution that they think sounds really good to them. And just like not thinking it all the way through, maybe they haven't run it past somebody else who's a trusted advisor, somebody that they know well, maybe a spouse, maybe their brother, maybe somebody else who they feel like, ought to, just to run it past and say, here's what I'm thinking about, here's the situation, here's what I'm thinking about doing. How does that sound to you? So many times there's a little tweak, there's a little detail that we overlook that another person can add that really makes a huge difference. to the whole situation. A big one is making assumptions about the situation. They don't do a good job of sifting through the fact and opinion and the gossip and the hearsay. They have maybe people that for one reason or another, they just trust them a whole lot more than they trust other people, but they only take the information from the people that they trust, when maybe they don't have as much information as somebody that maybe they don't know as well. Um, and then I think in these situations too, not a situation like this, but in other situations, they don't make the hard decision to let somebody go when it was clearly a situation where they should have been let go on the spot. Just like we talked about the animal abuse or physical contact at work or sexual harassment or something like that. They don't, even in those situations, they can't make the decision to terminate someone, which just creates a whole other set of issues. And you've mentioned 2 or 3 times, Shelley, just about precedents. We have to think about that, and all these things that we do. We have to think about what kind of a precedent are we setting, and if this were to come up with someone else, would I be comfortable doing the same thing? And it needs to be a factor in how we make those decisions. Yeah. Yeah. So the next step, so now we have all this information from this manager. And the next step then is, so what are our policies on this? Do we have a clear policy? Do we have a zero tolerance policy on certain things? Um, I'm not a big fan of zero tolerance policies for this exact reason. If it's zero tolerance, it's zero tolerance. And, especially I have zero tolerance on absenteeism or tardiness. Those we have to be cautious of. Zero tolerance on animal, how we treat animals, and those are fine, okay, because they just have to be zero tolerance. When I help people put together employee handbooks, we have several sections in the handbook that we end that section, the section on discipline, the section on attendance, the section on paid time off and requests for paid time off and so on. We end that section with the statement, unique situations will be handled on a case-by-case basis by the owner. Okay. That always leaves us that opening there to say we're open to discussing your situation. And then all we have to do as an owner is we just have to make sure we're fairly consistent, even in those unique situations. We still want to be as consistent as we can there. Yeah, so we've got to look at our policies and have we written other people up for this? Do we have a 3 strikes and you're out process? And again, we just want to be as consistent as possible. And if we're going to make exceptions, are the ones that we can that we feel comfortable doing again. The next step then, so we've processed that. Now this is the time we have to really engage what we call engaging our moral imagination. Okay.
Moral imagination.
Yeah, we have to be creative,
Okay.
thinking up alternative options that are based on our core values, that are based on what we feel is simply the best thing to do in this situation, who's involved in everything. But we need to be creative in how we handle this. We can have lots of different options that are all moral, that are all ethical, but they focus maybe on different things, or they're designed to address a certain issue. So then we just, again, we look at all of our options, and then we start to ask ourselves questions. Okay, so we've got maybe these 2 or 3 options, and we're starting to narrow it down, and we start to ask ourselves the questions. Okay, so which one of these best lines up with our core values, who we are as a company, and who I am as an owner, and my family is as an ownership family? Who are we? How do we want to be seen by people? Um, who are the people that may be impacted by this, either directly or indirectly? What do we owe to those people who may be impacted? Maybe somebody's going to be shortchanged a little bit. Maybe somebody's going to be inconvenienced. We're taking care of this one person, but it's going to inconvenience others. And so how do we navigate that? Is there any potential harm that could be done? We have to think through that. Um, and again, as I mentioned before, is this one of those situations where the number one thing is to just show grace to an individual and try and work this situation out simply because it's just such a difficult situation? I have one of my long-term clients, he amazes me at how much grace he has shown to people in a wide variety of situations. And yeah, has he been burned a few times? Yeah, he has. He's had a couple of times in the last several years that I've worked with him where he wished he'd have just let him go when it first came up. But I tell you, he's actually kept employees that he otherwise would have lost had he not shown them that patience and that grace. Um, will I be able to? So if I take this course of action, can I sleep well tonight based on what I decided? Can I get a good night's sleep? Am I that confident with having worked through this and handled it? And then the other thing is, if somebody asks me, so, people find out, they're going to find out, and somebody asks me, so why did you do that? Do I feel comfortable defending myself? And a lot of times this is referred to the CBS 60 Minutes question. In other words, CBS finds out about it and they send their 60 Minutes crew to your doorstep and they stick a microphone and a camera in your face and say, so tell me, why did you do that? Okay. Do I have that level of confidence that in my ability to explain what it is? People may disagree, but can I explain what I did and why I did that? And then number one thing is to act. We have to come up with our solution and act. Yeah, yeah. So any comments, Shelley? I've been talking for a while.
Well, what are some of the, what advice would you give to someone who's found themselves in this exact situation where they had to use, what was that? Their moral imagination?
The moral imagination,
Their
yeah.
moral imagination and carry through with some ethical action on a long-term employee. But when they stand back from it and get to do the 60 minutes review of it or be a armchair quarterback, they realize that they handled it poorly. Then
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Well, and this happens. And this is a part of our own professional development and leadership. We're going to do some things that at the time we thought it was the best thing to do. Maybe some situations changed, maybe some consequences that we overlooked. My experience has been, and I've been called in on numerous of these, and that is number one, review it again. And ask yourself, okay, so what would I have done differently? And then develop a plan. Most of the time, we can actually go back to that person and say, or maybe somebody who was inconvenienced, or maybe somebody that some consequences happened to them indirectly. Or maybe we set a precedent that we didn't intend to set. But we come up with so what would have been better? And then we decide, is it better enough that we need to retrace our steps, go back to the individual and say, I don't think I handled that right. And I'm not going to renege on what I told you that I'm going to do. But now there's some more consequences. Okay. Now I'm modifying what I intended to do because I overlooked some things. So we own it. It's our responsibility. We made the decision. We admit that we could have done better. If you want to, that's a great way to build trust with your employees is when leaders say, I could have done a better job. That builds trust. It doesn't erode trust.
Mhm.
And so you just honest with it. Maybe again, if there are some consequences that affected other people that you didn't plan on, you do your best to correct that. The main thing is that we learn from that. We accept that we could have done better. Here's what I overlooked. But I have not found a situation yet where we couldn't go back in to that, revisit it, explain the situation. Obviously, we don't want to renege on an agreement unless we have completely new information.
Mhm.
If we have completely new information, that changes everything. Okay. If somebody was dishonest with us, if the person we were trying to help lied to us, okay, the deal's off at that point. Okay. Whole different situation. But if we just realize, I'm the one that messed up, this is on me, we can go back through that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up to questions at
Sure.
this time. Just take a little bit of a break. I've got a screen here. I'll tell everybody who's listening live right now. Feel free. Nobody will know who is submitting the question, but if you have an example that you want to pass forward for Don to kind of diagnose and to maybe walk us through to give us a little bit of insights, now would be a good time to do it. Don, as we wait for some of that, I'm thinking about another friend of mine who's a HR coach, a human coach, and he always says, Shelley, we only see ourselves from behind our own eyes.
Yes.
How do you, as a manager, where do you go to be able to get a unbiased perspective of how you're managing, leading, coaching?
Yeah. Well, you identified, and your friend is exactly right. So we have to practice putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. Okay. A friend of mine jokes, he says, walk a mile in my moccasins, that's a piece of cake. Spend 30 seconds in my head, that'll freak you out.
Scary,
So
huh?
right. But we have to recognize that we have our own thoughts, we have our own perspectives on things, and we have to deliberately work hard to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And the more that we practice that, and this goes back to that active listening. When we're actively listening, we are taking ourselves completely out of the equation. Completely. We shut off our own thinking. All that we're doing is processing information. That's hard to do. It's hard to do. And yet, I do a lot of coaching of other coaches and consultants, and get this same question: how do we make these changes? Well, the first thing is we have to be self-aware. We have to be very aware of the fact I have certain situations I struggle with. I have certain situations that frustrate me. I have certain types of people that I struggle with. We just have to admit that. Have to admit what are the situations and circumstances that lead to that, and then we have to work on those. And so we have to realize in ourselves what are those little things that go off in our brain that tend to get us going in a particular direction, and that's the point that we start to make assumptions and we start to get ahead of ourselves, and we're disconnected. And one of the big things in this process, you saw me mention it several times, is asking questions. And if we are actively listening, the next question will come very naturally. A lot of people think that, okay, I just need to know what questions to ask, and I need to go through these exact same questions, and then I'll get all the information that I need. Somebody may throw you a curve. Somebody may, throw in drop a little comment in there, and if you're not actively listening, you won't pick up on that. And yet it may be the most important thing that they say. And if we don't ask that follow-up question, if we're not curious, if we're not actively listening, and we don't ask that follow-up question, we may have missed the entire point of what that person could have told us. So yeah,
Well,
so we have that. Yeah.
So in that active listening, there's the words that they say, but then there's all the other language too. How do you take that in and
Yeah.
bundle that in? There's the inflection, the body language,
hmm
eye
hmm
contact, um,
Yeah.
tone, all of it. How do you bundle?
Well, this is a big topic, but I'll summarize it in the easiest terms. You have to understand that the brain processes information based on three things. Okay, you mentioned all of them. What are the words that they're saying? What is the tone that they're saying them? What's the inflection in their voice? What are the words that they're putting most emphasis on? And then body language. What we misunderstand or don't realize is that the brain, if we were to say, okay, during this conversation you and I are having, my brain is paying attention to the things that you're saying, to your own body language. I can see you. So I'm listening to the words, I'm watching the body language, I'm listening to the inflection in your voice. My simple explanation is my brain is only spending 7% of that time listening to your words. It's spending about 36% of the time listening to the tone. It's more interested in which words do you put the most emphasis on than it is on the specific words. Most people's brains only listen to about every fourth word anyway, especially when we know people well. We have these conversations all the time. Our brain is wired for efficiency. It just picks up on the keywords. And is pretty good at it, frankly. It's pretty good at it. Well, there's 57% left, and that's all body language. We tend to, in these situations, spend most of our time trying to come up with the right words to use, the right questions to ask, and the specific things. When really we should spend less time on that and more time rehearsing our own body language when we ask those questions to make sure that we appear to be curious, we appear to be non-threatening, we don't appear to in any way to be intimidating. Okay. And to be paying attention to their body language as well. And so that we can so we're picking up on that because you're exactly right. Their body language, frankly, tells us more than the words and the tone combined. That takes practice.
So, what are some of the tools that you use for yourself to really stay focused? So you're not listening to missing every fourth word or listening to every fourth word, that you're not filtering through your own experiences and thoughts, that you're truly taking in what's happening in that moment. How do you
Yeah.
hold yourself to that discipline?
The number one thing is personal accountability in those situations. Anytime I'm going to talk to somebody, I make sure I'm totally focused on them. That takes practice, and you fall into that habit of, they are now the most important person in my life. I need to pay attention to them. I'm watching for that inflection. I'm picking up on those subtle things. But the key thing is, again, I have to take myself out of the equation. And frankly, that's for a lot of people the hardest part of it is to take myself out. This is not about me. This is about them and what they have to share with me. And I've found over the years that if I can do that effectively, it's amazing what people will tell me. They will share all kinds of things. I have multiple times when I go into a business, maybe it's the first time there, and I've got 15 people to talk to during the day. And I'm going to talk to them one-on-one, and I'm going to walk around the operation and catch them in different things. I'm going to ride in a feed truck and a pickup truck and be in the parlor and and walk through the cattle pens and just talk to people. And I've got like 20 minutes with them. And I always love it when the owner says, "Okay, most of the people you talk to, they're gonna be fine. You have a hard time shutting them up. But this person here, you're probably done with them in 5 minutes. They just aren't going to say anything." I love that person because I go and I make sure that all I do is pay attention to them. They tie me up for 30 minutes. They can't shut up. And it's simply because I've given them permission to say whatever it is. I don't question anything that they tell me. I ask questions and I show them I really truly enjoy talking to them. But it's almost every single time that people do that simply because, and honestly, I am nobody special. I just have learned these things over time, and it's incredible how much information I'm able to harvest.
So, what's a trigger or triggers that you listen for when to verify truth? When you're kind of your truth meter might get tipped, cues that humans do, things that
Hmm.
actions that they say that might take take you down a different path.
Yeah. Oh, Shelley, you're asking such good questions, and they're important ones. Um, I do counseling. I'm a certified counselor, and I've taken lots and lots of training. And one of the things that we learn in counseling is to listen for being manipulated. Especially people that are addicts, people that have chronic relationship issues, people that have um, just a wide variety of issues, relationship issues, so on. Um, when they're chronic problems, they tend to use manipulative behaviors. So we just have to listen for those things. Are they laying a guilt trip on me? Are they trying to fudge on information? Do they kind of drop some hints about some things and hope that I'll pick up on it? Okay. Um, do they say some things that are inconsistent? And then when you point it out, do they blame me for that inconsistency? No, you heard me wrong the first time. Okay. I listen for those types of things. When we're dealing with someone that we're concerned, are they telling us the truth? Then I just start to ask really detailed questions. Okay, so you said this. Well, tell me about this. Okay. So I get them to commit to a lot of specific information. And then I listen for inconsistencies and I come right back to it. I said, well, but you said this before. Help me understand. I have a policy, never call a liar to their face. That just
Mm.
puts them on defense, disrupts it, throws them off. Help My strategy that seems to work fairly well is to just continually point out the inaccuracies in the things that they're saying. Let them, in a way, kind of bury themselves. And at some point in time, they're caught. And you'll see it in their body language when they know they're caught. You don't even have to bring it up. It's like, okay, so let's talk about what really happened. Okay. Now we're going to get the truth because we've exhausted all of their alternatives. Well, Shelley, I know we've got a few minutes. You've got maybe some questions. I thought I would just take a minute and go through our scenario and wrap that up briefly so that you
Please.
know kind of how that ended, because it is a real life a scenario that I fit into this dairy example. But it's really a unique way that the solution came about. Um, so the owner went back to the employees and said, hey, here's the situation with this manager. And he got permission from the manager to say, I think your coworkers want to help you with this. I know I want to help, me and my family want to help, but I bet they want to help too. So he went back to them and after getting permission, and he asked if they had any ideas. And if they were, personally willing to help anyway. Well, they really surprised him. They suggested that no, hey, let him go early on Friday. We'll cover for him. Don't expect him to come in early on Monday, okay, for those weekends that he's gone. Just, give him a couple extra hours. We want him to spend some time with his family before he has to go on Friday. We want him to be rested up before he comes here. He's a lot more good to us fully rested than he is, dragging himself around. We will cover for him. Um, and his coworkers said, we'll get it done. Okay. We'll make the adjustments. We'll make sure that we've got people here. What was really neat is they said, well, he's gonna miss some hours. Tell you what, if you'll let us, we'll take we'll take one of our PTO days and donate it to him so he doesn't take a hit for the time that he misses. And so they basically gave him some of their PTO hours, which was way outside of policy. Nobody had ever offered to do that before. But in this situation, they wanted to help. And this was one of the ways that they thought that they could. And frankly, that was to them, it was better than taking up a collection and getting him some gas money, you know.
Yes.
Um, they did that too, but as time went on, and they said, hey, our families are gonna, put together some care packages so that on Friday when you have to take off, we got some treats and some games and stuff in there for your son and some snacks for you guys for the weekend, and so they just really rallied around this guy. And as you mentioned in your comments, this is a this is a rare opportunity for us to grow as a team and really become a cohesive family. When the manager found this out, he says, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to let you do all of that. No, I'm going to, anybody who, has to work extra hours on, Friday, well, I'm gonna work late on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, or come in early. I'm going to make up those hours." So it just was a really great process. And to me, it's one of those great examples of, Just think if, we talked to them about mistakes. Just think if the owner hadn't taken the time to do that,
Mhm.
you know, may have lost a really good employee. May have, may have just, it may have just been miserable for everybody
Absolutely.
without kind of a, this kind of a solution. But yeah, just, give people an opportunity to help. You'd be surprised what they do.
So Don, we have just a couple minutes left here.
Sure.
This is the time of year where, I mean, there's never a slow time on a dairy because we've always got things going
It's always
on.
something.
There's always something. We're doing a lot of thinking work this time of year and probably prep, which is probably reviews and those kind of things. What are a couple of things, maybe like one or two, maybe ultimately three things that we should plan for, think about, or take action on that would help encourage everybody to be more um, taking an ethical approach, show grace, and ultimately build team solidarity and
Yeah.
efficiency.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when we talk about ethics, we talk about our core values, we talk about our character. If somebody what's our brand as a family and as a company? What's our brand? How are we known by the community? It starts with leadership. Leadership has to, and it's never been more important than now because we don't bring in people that necessarily understand who we are. And frankly, we have more and more people that come in without a clear set of their own ethical standards, their own core values. And so we have to, number one, outline that from a leadership standpoint. We have to outline what our core values are. We have to list them and we have to define them. We may think that honesty or integrity or teamwork as a core value is pretty easy. Everybody understands that. They don't. People define honesty and integrity very differently now. Some do. So we have to define that for them so they understand what we're talking about when we use those terms. Then leadership needs to communicate those to managers and to employees and help, especially the managers, understand here's who we are, reinforce those with them, make sure they understand it, and then teach our managers how to reinforce that with our employees. Reinforcing it means we talk to them about them. I have a lot of companies that every month or every quarter, they take one of their core values and they focus on that during staff meetings, during one-on-one conversations, during difficult decision-making situations. How do we apply that core value to this situation? They look for people who exemplify that core value. Here's someone who showed integrity by coming to me right away and saying, "Hey, I I backed the pickup truck uh, into one of the tractor blades and bent the bumper. I just wanted you to know." They tell you immediately, well, that's a person with integrity rather than, well, I hope they don't find that out. Or, it could happen to anybody, But no,
Right.
that shows integrity. You let people know this is what we mean by integrity. Yeah. So it is a process whereby we identify them, we define them, we communicate them, and we reinforce them time after time after time. And so that people know what we mean.
Awesome. I think that is a great place for us to call it the top of the hour. And Don, we appreciate Don Tyler for bringing us this discussion that I think that all of us will wrestle with, how to handle some of these really gray areas, ethical dilemmas that can happen in the workplace. They happen in our spaces on our farms, and probably even within those family dynamics where we need to be able to be wise in how we work through them and handle them. So we appreciate you and we applaud you for today's time and the information that you
Yeah.
shared. Looking forward this next week, we wish all of you guys the very, very best, and we hope that we see you back here on the Dairy Signal. So signing out from Professional Dairy Producers, be your very best, and we hope that we see you next week at the PDPW Business Conference. Thank you.